The next morning, Claire acted as if nothing had happened. She hummed while pouring coffee, kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, and asked about my flight. I watched her closely, searching for any flicker of guilt, any hesitation in her movements. Nothing. She was either the best liar I had ever met, or truly believed I was too blind to see the truth. I spent the day replaying last night's events in my head. The way she had smoothed her dress before knocking on Ryan's door. The way she had smiled when she left, oblivious to the fact that I had been sitting in my car, watching her every move. And that text, "I miss you. Long night at work." As if those words weren't a slap in the face. As if they didn't confirm everything I had feared. That evening, she got home at her usual time, set her purse on the counter, and stretched like she had nothing to hide. I forced myself to stay calm. "How's Laura?" I asked casually, stirring my drink. She barely blinked. "A mess. Poor thing." She sighed. "We were up all night talking." The lie rolled off her tongue, effortlessly. I took a sip, watching her reaction, but she didn't even flinch. "Yeah, what was she saying?" She hesitated for half a second, so quick that anyone else would have missed it. "You know, the usual. Heartbreak, trust issues. She's thinking of moving back to her parents' place." I nodded slowly, forcing myself to hold her gaze. The only sound in the room was the distant hum of the refrigerator. "You know what's funny?" I said, setting my glass down. "I texted Laura this morning, just to check on her." Her fingers froze on the strap of her purse. "Oh." She said she hasn't seen you in weeks. For the first time I saw something crack in her expression. A flash of something: panic, anger, fear. But just as quickly, she composed herself, letting out a soft laugh. She probably misunderstood. We talked on the phone mostly. A master class in deflection. I almost admired it. Almost. That night, when she fell asleep, I went through her phone. She always kept it locked, but I had seen her passcode once, when she thought I wasn't looking. My hand shook as I typed it in. It opened. I scrolled through her messages. Most were normal, casual conversations. But then I saw a thread with no name, just a phone number, and inside, "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I wish I could wake up next to you instead of sneaking back home. He has no idea." I almost feel bad. Almost. My stomach twisted, but I kept scrolling. Then at the bottom, the message that sent ice through my veins. "This weekend, our getaway. Just us. Can't wait to finally be free. Free. From me." I locked the phone, placed it exactly where I found it, and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wasn't just being betrayed, I was being erased. The moment she said it, I knew she had been waiting for this. "I haven't loved you for years. I just didn't have the courage to tell you." The words came too easily, too rehearsed. She wasn't nervous, wasn't hesitant, she was in control. I stared at her, searching for some flicker of regret, but there was nothing. Just finality. That's when I knew this wasn't a sudden revelation. It was an execution. She had planned everything. The suitcase by the door wasn't packed in a hurry. The account she emptied wasn't touched in a moment of impulse. It had all been done methodically, piece by piece, while I was still sleeping beside her every night, still believing we were living the same life. The evidence was all around me. I just hadn't seen it before. The work nights that stretched later and later, the sudden interest in keeping her phone locked, the shift from loving touches to absent-minded nods. And now, here she was, peeling herself away like I was nothing but an old coat she had outgrown. She left, and the house felt different immediately. Quieter, heavier. I didn't touch anything she left behind. I let her scent fade from the pillows, let the silence take over. I didn't call her, didn't beg, but when I checked our bank account and saw the missing money, something clicked inside me. Not sadness, not even anger. Something sharper, something cold. This wasn't just a woman falling out of love. This was something else. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. At first, it was just to confirm what I already knew, that she had been planning this for a long time. But then I saw it. Strange transactions under her name. Small amounts, sent to unlisted accounts. The pattern stretched back years. Payments every few months. Never enough to raise suspicion, but consistent. Some of them had references attached. Consultation, legal fees, investment transfer. but they didn't lead to any law firm or investment agency I could find. The more I looked, the more questions I had. And then, I made my choice. I didn't want closure. I wanted answers. I sold my car, left my phone at the train station, and disappeared. Renting a place under an alias was surprisingly easy. Cash deposits, an old ID I had from college, a simple lie about working remotely. No one questioned Daniel Reed when he signed a 6-month lease in a quiet town. No one cared who I had been before. But I wasn't hiding. I was hunting. Every night, I went through the records again, mapping out her transactions, tracing the names. I didn't sleep much, didn't eat much either. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was reconstructing something she thought she had erased. Because whatever Claire had been doing behind my back, it wasn't just about an affair. And I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a loose end. The moment I walked into that small, unassuming bank and handed over Ryan's stolen card, I wasn't sure what I would find. But as the teller typed away, the screen flickered with something that made my stomach drop. The transaction log was littered with unfamiliar names and cryptic details. But what caught my eye wasn't just a random account. It was Parker Holdings, and I had heard that name before. Claire had mentioned an investment under a similar name a few months ago. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But now, seeing it linked to Ryan, the connection felt deliberate. I stared at the numbers on the screen, every inch of me screaming to get out, but my feet stayed frozen. I needed answers. As I walked out of the bank, I felt like the walls were closing in. The name Parker Holdings was linked to Claire, linked to me, and that wasn't a coincidence. She had once explained it away as a harmless investment, a business opportunity she had stumbled across. But now, I could see the bigger picture. This wasn't just a failed investment or a misunderstanding. There were layers to this. Layers that went deep into something criminal. Something I hadn't signed up for. I couldn't sit with that knowledge. I couldn't ignore it. So I found Samantha Lewis. I had heard about her work from a former colleague. She had helped untangle complex financial scams. I called her with a burner phone, my hands shaking as I spoke to her in hushed tones. When she agreed to meet, I knew this was my only shot at uncovering the truth. Samantha's office was cramped, lined with old case files and dusty bookshelves. She didn't offer small talk. She just took the papers I handed her and started scanning. As she read, I couldn't help but watch her face. Her brow furrowed deeper with each document. When she finally looked up, the weight of her expression was heavy.
This is bad, Ethan.
Your wife isn't just involved. She's complicit. Her words hit me like a freight train. I had always thought Claire's role was passive, a pawn in Ryan's scheme, but the documents I had stolen proved otherwise. Claire had signed off on transactions, significant ones. She had knowingly facilitated money laundering. She was in deeper than I had ever imagined. Samantha leaned forward, pushing the files aside. I've worked fraud cases like this before. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the forged contracts, it's all connected. Your wife may have started as an innocent bystander, but now she's part of this mess. That's when the reality hit. Claire had knowingly stayed in this web. She wasn't just a victim of Ryan's manipulation. She was a willing participant. She had signed off on fraudulent transfers, falsified records, and turned a blind eye to the damage she was causing. The accounts linked back to her Parker Holdings, her name appearing in places I never imagined it would. This was bigger than I ever thought. Samantha's warning echoed in my mind. If you dig too deep, they'll notice. I felt the weight of those words. The danger wasn't just in uncovering the truth. It was in what would happen once the people behind the scam realized. I knew. I sat there in the dim light, the weight of everything crashing down on me. Claire's words echoed in my head, but they didn't make sense, not yet. I had always thought I knew her. We had built a life together. But now, as I sifted through the papers, the bank statements, and everything else, it was clear everything I thought I knew was a lie. The first hint had come weeks ago, when I saw a series of unusual transactions, small transfers to offshore accounts, under names that didn't add up. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just a clerical error or something that would explain itself. But then I saw the name that would unravel everything. Parker Holdings, a name that shouldn't have been anywhere near Claire's financial records. I remembered her mentioning an investment a few years ago, something about a joint opportunity she'd gotten into, but at the time, it didn't seem odd. She had always been the one who handled the money, and I trusted her. But that name Parker Holdings was eerily close to ours. I checked the bank records more carefully. The dates matched with some of the most chaotic moments of our marriage, the times when she seemed more distant, more absorbed in her work, and then the numbers added up. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, moving through accounts I had no knowledge of. The moment I saw the transfers, I couldn't deny it any longer. She had been hiding something from me, something far darker than I could have imagined. I didn't just sit back and let this go on. I needed to know the truth. I had to see it for myself. I started investigating. I visited the small local bank where I knew Ryan had connections. Disguising myself, I used a stolen ID card from his office, a card that I had borrowed from one of the briefcases I found. At first, the bank staff was reluctant, but I had done enough research on Ryan's company to know how to get access to the records. There in front of me were large transactions, money moving under the name Parker Holdings and being laundered through various shell companies. It was as if I had stumbled into a labyrinth of lies and deceit, all connected back to Claire in some way. The sickening realization hit me hard. Ryan wasn't just a homewrecker. He was a part of a massive financial operation, and Claire wasn't just an innocent bystander. She had been involved. Worse, she knew it. When I pieced together the timeline, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Claire must have been aware of what was happening for much longer than she let on. At first, she was just a legal front, an unaware pawn in a much bigger game, but somewhere along the line, she made the decision to stay in it. She got too deep. That's when I reached out to Samantha Lewis, the private investigator who had been tracking Ryan's company for months. She confirmed everything. Claire had been complicit. The magnitude of what I had uncovered was hard to fathom. I thought I was just dealing with a personal betrayal, but what I had found was much bigger. Something that went beyond our marriage, beyond even Claire. She wasn't just caught in an affair. She was caught in something much darker, something that threatened everything. When I confronted her, I expected anger, denial, maybe even a justification. But what I saw instead was fear. Fear that I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know what to do with the truth. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing the woman I had trusted, the woman I loved, had been hiding this from me. But it was undeniable. She had known, and now, I had to decide how far I was willing to go, to bring everything into the light. I could feel my hands tremble as I sat in that dark room, the air thick with tension. It was clear that Victor Hale wasn't just any criminal. He was something else entirely, calculated, powerful, and watching my every move. I had barely crossed the threshold of his office before he let me know that he was fully aware of everything I'd been doing. The feeling of being hunted settled over me like a heavy cloak. I couldn't escape. He already knew who I was and why I was here. He'd been watching me, waiting for the moment when I would make my move. And yet, I still couldn't back down. I had to play my part. Victor's calm demeanor made me sick. He was sitting there as if we were old acquaintances, offering me a seat, his words laced with a chilling form of politeness. I could see past the cold smile and into the cold, calculating mind that lay beneath. As he spoke, I had the unsettling feeling that every word was a weapon. "You've been digging, Ethan," he said with a sharp edge to his voice. "You've uncovered things you shouldn't have, things that concern me." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. He already knew everything. I couldn't look away from his eyes, despite the fear crawling up my spine. "I'm not here to make deals," I said, trying to steady my voice. My body betrayed me with a sharp intake of breath, as Victor leaned in slightly, the air between us thick with danger. "You don't get to make demands," Victor replied, "but I'll let you in on something." His lips curled into a smile, but it was the kind of smile that made my blood run cold. "I know all about your little investigation. You think you're clever. Samantha wasn't in that accident by chance. That was a message. A warning shot. For you." I felt my heart stop. Samantha, how could he know? How could he know everything? The sickening realization hit me like a hammer. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. It was about me. Victor had been following my every step, my efforts to uncover the fraud, the corruption, everything. And now, Samantha had paid the price for my curiosity. I fought to keep my composure, but I felt a pang of guilt for getting her involved. I knew it was a risk from the start, but I didn't think it would cost her everything. Victor's eyes never left me, like he was savoring my reaction. I don't take kindly to people poking around in my business, Ethan, but I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. Forget about everything you've learned, and leave. You and Claire can disappear. If you do that, I'll let you go. If not, well, you saw what happened to your friend. His words hung in the air, heavy with finality. I had no doubt that he would kill me without a second thought if I didn't comply, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I had already come this far. I gritted my teeth and forced the words out. I'm not going anywhere. This ends with you. Victor's smile vanished. In the space of a second, I saw something much darker in his eyes. It was a warning, the kind of warning you get from a predator before it decides to strike. His next words were quieter, but no less menacing. I've been watching you, Ethan. Your life, your moves, your weaknesses. You think you're in control, but you've already lost. My breath caught in my throat. I had never felt so small, so insignificant. But something inside me refused to give in. Something told me that no matter how many threats Victor made, this wasn't the end. Not yet. I felt the weight of her words like a hammer to my chest. The moment I confronted Claire, I didn't start with the affair. I started with the money. I had to know why she had been transferring large sums, and why our financials looked so off. She didn't hesitate to break down in front of me, her face a mixture of fear and guilt, and as she spoke, the truth began to unravel. She told me, with a tremor in her voice, that she had known about the fraud, but what stung the most wasn't her confession. It was what followed. She admitted that she had been in too deep to back out. Ryan had used her, manipulated her, just as he had used so many others. He never loved her. She was a pawn. The most chilling part was when she mentioned Victor Hale, a name I'd never heard before, a man who had masterminded the entire operation. It was Victor who was behind the money laundering, behind the scheme that had used Claire as a legal front. I stood there, stunned. My mind raced, but I could hardly process her words. For the first time, I saw her not as the betrayer, but as a woman caught in a web she couldn't escape. She begged me to run away with her, to escape from everything, from Ryan and Victor, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet. I couldn't just walk away, not when I knew there was something much bigger at play. This wasn't just about a failed marriage. This was about revenge, justice, and uncovering the truth. I could feel the darkness pressing against me, knowing that if I didn't act now, I'd be trapped forever. I made a decision then. I couldn't trust Claire, not fully. She was too involved, too close to Ryan and Victor's empire. But I could use her. I told her I would help take down the operation, but I made it clear I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing this for myself, for the truth that had been buried beneath layers of lies. As I moved forward with the plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was like a shadow had settled over me. I reached out to Samantha Lewis, the private investigator, hoping she could help me dig into Ryan's connections. But before we could get any real traction, something terrible happened. Samantha was in a car accident. The details were vague, but I knew this wasn't an accident. Someone was trying to warn me, to stop me from digging too deep. I knew Ryan was behind it, but I couldn't prove it. And now, with Samantha in a coma, I was on my own. Despite everything, I couldn't back down. I had to play along. I had to pretend to be a desperate man, looking for a way to get his money back. It was the only way to get close to Victor, to gain his trust. I sat across from him in that dark, dimly lit office, feeling the weight of his eyes on me as he listened to my story. He didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. And then, he finally did. Victor knew everything about me. He'd been watching me for months. The moment he said it, I realized how far this had gone. Samantha's accident. It was no accident. It was a warning. My heart sank as I processed the truth. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal. I was part of something much more dangerous, and the further I went, the more I realized that I might not make it out alive.